Dr. Gold. It's an honor to have you on to start. To first off, just thank you for joining me. And first off, how you doing today?
I think I'm good. Maybe you can't tell without an MRI, but on the surface, I'm pretty good.
With you said you exercise every day
I
when we were
do.
talking before. What is your kind of exercise routine right now in your life?
So, I mean, I have a trainer in Florida, but when I'm on the road, I would get up, do some stretching, uh, do a little bit of uh, floor exercises, simple stretching, push-ups, sit-ups. Then when I'm ready, I put on my sneakers and I'll do a little run. I like uh, trail running if I is
Yeah,
long
definitely.
and trail walking. So I run until I say, yeah, probably I'm 75. I should walk. And then I do like every other day elliptical
hmm
and then weights. I also swim. And
Swimming's such a good exercise.
it is the best. I a couple of our children were Division I swimmers, and I don't know. I'd say I don't. It's part of what I learned about Hippocrates, the and the father of medicine. And people
Mhm.
always say he said first do no harm, but actually one of his main messages in like being the father of modern medicine was nothing in excess.
hmm
It, and I pretty much live by that. So I don't
Yeah.
exercise to excess, but I do it every day religiously.
Yeah, man. I agree with a lot of that, especially around, I guess, the things that can benefit you. It's amazing. You've been studying addiction for almost 50 years.
It's
Can,
crazy, isn't it? Like I look like a teenager.
you do. You look incredible. And a lot of that's because you're doing exercising. With do you remember your first interest like into addiction? What got you into it?
Yes, I do. So I was a medical student at the University of Florida, and at that time, people were taking amphetamines for memory, and I'm going like, that's so interesting. Why are they doing this? And turned out that there wasn't really a straightforward literature on this, so I studied whether in animals rather than people, or rather than taking it myself, uh, whether amphetamine could improve your memory. And I discovered that something that exists today, it's called state dependency of memory. And what it means is if you learn something on amphetamines, your maximum recall is on amphetamines at the same blood level. If you learn something straight and you're tested on amphetamine, you have a mismatch and you don't have maximal memory, or if you
Dang.
learn, or vice versa. So the states, and now people, if there's anybody that's had a baby, will remember, like you remember childbirth when you're in it again. So oftentimes in a second childbirth, women will say, I can't believe I did this again. I just didn't remember what it was like. Well, of course, they didn't remember that state dependency of memory. So that was really my first study. And then I went on to look at how opioids, heroin at that time, interacted in the brain and caused addiction. And that was probably my biggest early discovery, was finding the brain pathway for opioid addiction. And the good news, Sam, is that it's the same pathway that they say today in the textbooks. So in 50 years, it hasn't moved. Like, well, if you want to
That's
go into,
incredible.
it is, if you want to go into a career that you don't have to worry about being outdated, go into like neuroanatomy, because the brain can't change in your lifetime. It's too slow to change. So it's like I could teach medical neuroscience
Mhm,
in medical school, whether at Yale or WashU or University of Florida or anywhere as a visiting.
mhm.
They haven't changed the brain. So it's just very straightforward. So the neuroanatomy of opioid withdrawal, I did that. Then that meant I could helped develop new treatments. And we developed a detox treatment called clonidine and another one that's related similarly called lofexidine. We started the use of naloxone or Narcan in
Mhm.
1984. No, by 84, I had written Wonder Drugs. In 70, the early 70s to late 70s, naloxone was made by Endo Labs, and it was we could use it. And so I gave it to my first patient probably in 74.
Got
And
it.
an
Dang.
emergency room rescued them. And then a long-acting
So some
naloxone
medical assisted treatment.
yeah. In fact, thank you. I have an award that I got from the President Obama's White House drug czar, where they called me the father of medication assisted
Mm,
treatment.
dang,
But
very cool.
everybody wants to be the father of something that works.
What's what's interesting to me and as I dove into your work is you haven't just stayed saying on opioids. You haven't stayed just on cocaine. And you've kind of have a broad field. And I didn't know this. You were telling me, I think, from researchers, impactful researchers, you're like number 13 on the list. And a lot of that you said had to do with the things that you went into. Now you have students that are also proving these things that you researched. Um, and and I don't know if it can be broken down in a simple thing, but from your point of view, where does addiction come from with individuals?
So it'll be complicated, like you say.
Hmm.
So there'll be some things where genetics is very important. Maybe for alcohol use disorder, it could be half of the risk. Some drugs seem to not have very much to do with genes, but have to do with early exposure and early lifetime experiences. So now an early exposure, if you're a child of a cigarette smoking mother,
Hmm.
you have a high rate of cigarette smoking. And in your brain, you have too many nicotine receptors. They kind of grow. So you have like the genes at conception, but then they can be changed or modified, and that causes risk. So children who are in the household with secondhand drugs,
Hmm.
smoke, crack, and we actually did a study in Afghanistan of children exposed to opium smoking, which was a 5-year study that showed the same thing, that cigarette smoking, cannabis smoking, opium smoking changes the early childhood brain and makes it more likely that those children have substance use disorder. So to make a complex answer, I did write a blog on the genetics of addiction for Psychology Today. And if you read that, you'll see that genes are not destiny, that
Hmm.
much of it is these kinds of either early exposures, trauma, pain, and then bad learning.
Yeah,
So
sure.
just bad learning is another thing that's minimized. Like instead of people who become addicted might spend 4 years, little bit here, sometimes on a weekend, then creeps into the week.
Hmm.
4 years of bad learning like that is not like going to college. You don't come out with some new skill. You come out with some skill that can undermine your ability to live.
So with to dive into the bad learning a little bit, if it would be like a user that kind of like you said just started gradually, and then
Yeah.
over time they're just are they not learning the negative side effects of it quick enough or
So the drugs, because the drugs work. So if you think that drugs of abuse have been engineered through trial and error to have almost like a natural fit in the brain,
Mhm.
then you can respect them more. We don't have the kind of respect that we should have for these.
Yeah.
So, like, when I tell you that the brain thinks cocaine is dopamine,
Hmm. Which it
that's not,
loves.
Yes, that's not good. That means sooner or later the chemical wins,
Hmm.
because if you look at it's very hard for most people to hit a home run or break par or have a baby or these kind of euphoric moments, but they can be recaptured in a drug form without any effort.
In no
And
time.
that's when you're in trouble. So that's also why it's hard to break.
Do you think do you think in recent years we're starting to give them more respect?
I think that there's some evidence that younger people don't are basically to recoin Nancy Reagan's just say no. There's
Hmm.
more students not using drugs or alcohol at all than there was during my time, which included going to Woodstock. I
You might,
mean,
yeah. That's that, to think back on those days is kind of mind blowing to me because I feel like a lot of that stuff is just out in the open, which in some instances there still are like festivals and things like that in today's world. With with how I came across you recently, and I think I realized I had looked at some of your work in the past too, but wrote an article around addiction and exercise, and really how exercise can be, I guess, your solution or help you overcome addiction and depression. With exercise, what is it about exercise that can help people kind of break out of addiction and or depression? Because I think addiction and depression are, go hand in hand in a lot of ways.
they do. And in fact, most people who become addicted um, have at the same time depression or what we call anhedonia. And even in the current opioid epidemic with all of the overdoses,
Hmm.
there's a Harvard study where they interviewed people who overdosed and were rescued by naloxone. And they interviewed them after rescue, and almost half of them said, they wish that they had died, that they thought about dying, even though it wasn't really a suicide attempt. They think people would have been better off if they had died.
Hmm.
So it's kind of
Just so sad. Yeah.
it's right in there. So get back to exercise. So what I put in the article in Psychology Today was if you have the chance to speak to the Olympic doctor, which I did, and say, Dr. Barron, if exercise was a medicine and being tested by the U.S. government's FDA, what would happen? And he said, what would happen? Exercise would be declared safe and effective. They would stop the clinical trial because compared to placebo, exercise is amazingly powerful. So now the question is, how is it powerful? That's what you're
Hmm.
asking. So there are a number of ways. One, exercise has positive effects on the body, like heart, lung, liver, so forth. But in addition, has direct effects on the brain, has effects on the pleasure system.
Hmm.
People say endorphins are released. That's true. People say dopamine's released. That's true. People say serotonin's released. That's true. So basically, exercise is causing the release of chemicals that we try to release when we give you Prozac
Hmm.
or we give you antidepressants. So it's a natural antidepressant. Second, exercise, and I had this in the article, and people have written me and asked me what this is about, but there is a thing called BDNF.
Hmm.
So
I didn't know what that was.
yeah, but nobody did. Even like doctor colleagues, you'd have to be in neuroscience to know. But the person whose work led to this, Dr. Rita Levi Montalcini, was a Italian neuroscientist who escaped Hitler and came to the United States. And she discovered and won the Nobel Prize for this. She discovered nerve growth factor. So here you have some drugs have toxic effects on the brain. Good examples are alcohol, good examples are cocaine, and
Hmm.
good examples are methamphetamine, meaning that the brain doesn't look the same after the drug is gone. Now, how can you regenerate the brain? Well, through BDNF, and exercise is one of the rare things that increases the brain's ability to heal itself. That's a science fact.
That's fascinating.
You know what I mean? Like somebody won the Nobel Prize for this and you never heard about it. That's sad.
It
But
is.
yes, I
Everybody
mean,
should know that. They're
everyone should
healing
know
their
that.
brain.
Yes. And again, if exercise was a medicine,
Mhm.
every doctor would prescribe it. If exercise was in a pill, and believe me, the pharmaceutical industry is probably looking for a pill that
Mhm.
could be exercise, and then they could patent it, and we would get our insurance to pay for it. But it's in the meantime, it would be better if we just did it. But
Yeah.
there's been so much over focus on exercise for weight control
Oh my
that
goodness.
people, or heart disease, that people have forgot that the principal target for exercise is really the brain.
Hmm. You're
Like
speaking my
everybody
language.
says
Like,
they sleep better. Everybody says they have a sense of well-being. Everybody says they're more calm. Like now, the dose is a problem. How much exercise?
mhm.
What male versus female, the type of exercise. Like in men, exercise releases testosterone. That's good for me. I'm 75. There's just multiple benefits
Mhm.
that science has proven. And in the Psychology Today article, Peter Thanos, who's done most of the animal basic science that everyone has relied on, he's even showed that you could treat animals addicted to cocaine with just exercise, that it can reverse cocaine's effects, replace cocaine, but you have to give it time and you have to find the right exercise type. Like
Yep.
I Eminem is a common example because
Yeah.
he was so open about his treatment, but I don't know. I looked at social media and he had his 16-year AA uh, coin
Chip.
post.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, Chip Coast posted, and you go like 16 years. Like how many celebrities do we know that have been sober with that kind of history for 16 minutes?
Yeah.
Like 16, or and you go like, how did he do this? Detoxification, AA, 12-step meetings, exercise, it
Hmm.
said. He said exercise to the point of extreme
Hmm.
exercise. And that probably is where people need somebody like you,
Hmm.
like a professional to say, this is too much, this is too little, this is just right, this
Hmm.
is what you can do that won't harm yourself and still get the brain benefit.
Yeah. I look, it doesn't, because it's such a common question when people are like, oh, like I'm going to exercise because I want to lose weight or I want bigger muscles or I want abs or whatever. And people ask me all the time, like, why do you exercise? And I just try and tell them, like, for me, the physical benefits are just a side effect of the mental benefits. And I feel like people need to change the way they think around exercise and look at it as a mental, boost your mental mood. It has so many different has so many different effects outside of just the physical ones that you see on the outside. That has to do with your brain and your mood and everything that goes along with that sort of stuff. And I feel like in society we just look at it at the wrong way. We look at it as because like I want to be strong and run a marathon, and those are great, but like really what it does is it helps your brain and your mood and anything, like so many different benefits that come along with it. I wish just people looked at it in a different light. Like I need to exercise because it'll make me feel good, not just because it'll
Exactly.
make me look good.
If you think about it like a medicine, you might be able to do that. The other side of this, when you talk about depression, people who aren't
Hmm.
do not have substance use disorders, who are depressed, exercising helps them too. Now, they may be so depressed that they can't get out of bed. So I tell people, well, if you're their friend, go to their house and take them for a walk.
Hmm.
Like, can't you don't humiliate them for not being able to get out of bed. That's part of being depressed. Your lack of motivation, lack of energy, and then you're worse in the morning. That's severe depression.
Hmm.
But you're their friend. Go over there, take them for a walk.
Yeah.
And it's almost like an addiction, fake it till you make it. They're going to walk and walk and walk, and eventually they're going to go, maybe I'm going to do some more.
Yeah.
But once you get the motor running, it's a lot better for them than just sitting around thinking that doom and gloom.
Yep. With we talked about this before we started recording, but addictions don't have to be bad. Like for me, I think if you're addicted to things that are good in a sense like exercise, like I think addictive personalities also go along with success. Like very successful people have addicted personalities and they're just addicted to their work or whatever they're doing. Is there a way that you've found through your research where people can kind of take that addictive personality to drugs or alcohol or cocaine and kind of try and switch it into something good?
Well, we had a treatment program in Florida for um, impaired, what they called at that time, impaired health professionals, which were doctors who were addicted to
Hmm.
drugs. And depending on state rules and regulations, they couldn't really take medication-assisted treatments because they wouldn't be able to get their license
I've
back.
heard of that too.
They can only do it temporarily. So in that scenario, what you do have is you have detox, social support, meetings, and exercise. And we have some people who exercise so much they went through their knees. Uh, but and like I think he'd be happy to even describe this. The head of the program, who is a recovering physician, um, when his knees are done, he goes through town on these kind of like running machine thing. It looks like Star Wars, but it's but yeah, I think there's no doubt that positive uh, addictions. It could be to like music,
Hmm.
could be people play the piano. These are reinforcing brain activities,
Hmm.
not the same restorative activity as exercise. And that's where I'd make the difference. So it is true you feel good if you have pizza or ice cream, but
Not
uh,
good for you.
it's not good for you in the same way that exercise would be.
With and you touched on it a little bit earlier, but I want to dive into a little bit more what exercise does for your chemicals in your
Uh-huh.
brain. Can you describe to people how that affects your brain in a way and how it affects the chemicals in your brain?
Yeah. So like we said that exercise has an effect that causes the release of mood active neurotransmitters or chemicals. By doing that, it also strengthens those systems because the brain operates on this principle of use it or lose it. So if you're using it, it gets good at it.
Hmm.
And that system gets more power and more concentration. And really, in addiction, one of the things that happens is the drugs disconnect you from the natural way that that system is supposed to work.
Hmm.
And in doing that, the connections kind of loosen up. But so you can make them reconnect. That's very positive. Even in diseases like Parkinson's disease,
Dang.
exercise helps. And Parkinson's is a disease of dopamine, but of a different dopamine system of the brain.
Hmm.
Um, but still, you can get some reconnection, help with balance, help with tremor, help with well-being. So you do have this reconnection, then you have the strengthening of the systems, and you can see that on brain imaging, that the systems just the pleasure system is connected and intense. And you made that happen yourself through this quote medication of exercise.
Yeah,
And
that's
then we
incredible.
have regenerative power.
Hmm.
So there is no regenerative power in the brain without some intervention. It's very weak. The brain doesn't heal itself very well. And we've seen people who've had just binges of methamphetamine whose brain looks like they played middle linebacker for Clemson. So it's these are really good, healthy, restorative behaviors. But drugs of abuse is a famous researcher at the National Institute of Drug Abuse called Jean-Luc Cadet, Cadet, and I interviewed him for one of the Psychology Today articles, and his work was comparing methamphetamine to head trauma. Like, that's bad.
Yeah.
Everybody like says
So
your
bad.
favorite. Yeah, when people talk about your favorite drug in terms of repeated head trauma, you should find another drug. I mean, this is pretty bad. But how do you reverse that is the big question. And Peter Thanos says exercise and healthy eating.
That's incredible. It's I've never heard it described to me in that way of like rejuvenating or regenerating
Uh-huh.
like brain in a way through exercise, but it makes perfect sense to me with what I've been, how I live my life and just how I know how beneficial it is to me with habits, addiction, people in addiction or substance use disorder have their habits are just thrown off. They have bad habits. From exercise, I think it can be a great tool to improve your habits. What have
Definitely. If you go to the gym, you go to the gym. You might actually see somebody
Mhm,
that's not a substance user. Like if you're in your life as a substance user, the main thing is keeping the supply chain going.
mhm.
So you're going to run into the same people. Like, you go to the gym or you have a trainer, they talk about what you eat.
Yeah,
If you go and you're looking for drugs, they're not talking about what you eat. They're probably eating potato chips
yeah,
and sitting on a couch. And then, you go through the whole, like, what do you do after you work out? People might actually say hello to you. You might go out for coffee. You might go to a
find a
movie.
community. Yeah,
Right? Yeah, you might go to church. There's a million things. That's kind of what happens in addiction. You go backwards and you can undo that in recovery. So
yeah,
you stop seeing your non-drug using friends. Why sing in a church choir? I mean, when you can use drugs.
yeah.
I mean, why be a little league manager? There's a million things that put together a meaningful life,
Life, yeah.
and they're all taken piece by piece away because you have this fanatical love
Hmm.
relationship to drugs of abuse because they mimic brain reward and fool you into thinking that they're like food, water, and sex,
Yep.
primary drives.
With what I think is very interesting and probably more closely related. I mean, it is closely related, but I feel like people need to better understand this. And it might be the biggest crisis in the country is obesity and the addictions that we have to food in a lot of ways. You've done some really interesting work about addiction to food. Can you talk to me about that and just kind of like
Yeah, I'll give you
how how
quick,
bad it is right
a
now?
quick synopsis. So, um, many years ago, a colleague of mine who's now deceased was at Princeton University, and he had trained with the behavioral scientist at Harvard, B.F. Skinner. And so the model in animals for drugs of abuse is you basically hook them up to an IV and you give them a telegraph key. And if you just give them water in the IV after they hit the telegraph key, they don't hit it because they don't get anything out of it. But if you put cocaine in it, they become an accomplished drummer. They're hitting the telegraph key until they have a seizure and die. But this guy, Bart Hubble, had the idea, what happens if you put sugar in there? Turned out the animals hit the lever as if you gave them alcohol.
Dang.
So sugar has some equivalency to alcohol. Now, you don't need to know this, but in St. Kitts, the green vervet monkey searches around for rotten sugar cane. So it gets alcohol, fermented sugar cane in the wild. And so there is this crossover between sugar,
Hmm.
fermentation, and alcohol. And in the wild, this happens too. So it's not crazy that there's an equivalency between sugar and alcohol. Um, so that got me interested. And then I had two great mentees, Nicole Avena and Ashley Gearhart, and they both took this sugar thing like to the extremes. They're both famous researchers and authors. One showed that um, highly processed food, the more a food is processed,
Mhm.
more addicting it is.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know. And their theory at the University of Michigan laboratory is that the food companies are just smarter than we are
Hmm.
and have figured out why you just can't eat one potato chip.
Yeah, it's almost not a theory to me. That is like a fact.
All right. So you can see how I became an impactful mentor because I got such good students. And then the other one looked at fructose corn syrup
Hmm.
and how that's invaded the food supply, and also food choices, loss of control over the amount of food, and looked at pizza and ice cream as foods that are almost impossible to control. Like,
Oh
eh,
gosh.
it's just so, the bottom line here is if if you like a food, you probably shouldn't eat it. Like you can go like, what's the bioassay for
Yeah.
like what you should eat things like that you go like, I can't believe I ate that. It's just so disgusting. And you should not go out all the time
Hmm.
because what happens, Nicole Avena kind of showed this, the more variety you have in your diet, the more you eat and the more weight you gain because our brains are organized to extra reinforce variety. So if you have like, and in America, you could have Mexican food tonight and then steak the next night and then Chinese food the next night, and you go on and on. The more you do that, the heavier you're going to get. The reason that the Atkins diet worked is because it was boring. So
Mm,
over time, if you just eat steak every day, you
yeah.
actually eat less and less steak every day.
Yeah. With to touch on it real quick, is it similar to addiction to drugs
Yes.
with the brain chemicals and stuff?
Same,
Yeah.
same. There's no real difference, and that's the newest research on these GLP-1s, you
Hmm.
know, cause weight loss. They also reduce cannabis smoking.
Mm,
They reduce alcohol. They don't eliminate it, but they reduce it. So there is this commonality that if you want maximum drug reward, you should be hungry.
hmm.
If you want to reduce drug reward, you should be full. And then there is this interplay between the brain messengers, but they're the same messengers. So for the most part, if you're in withdrawal from any drug, you overeat because that's compensatory behavior and does calm your brain. It's the same brain systems and the same for pornography, the same for gambling. There's just sad for humans that the pleasure system is what we call phylogenetically stable, meaning it's the same for rats
Oh
as
gosh.
man. So like if there are people who say like we've evolved, our pleasure system sadly hasn't evolved very much. But what
Man.
has come into play is we do have a, an override pathway that rats don't have to say no.
Mm. That's right.
And
We have
but
a
that's
decision to make.
not built up enough.
Hmm.
So we say yes way too much to things that are harmful
Hmm.
because we haven't built the pathway, the muscle
Hmm.
necessary to control our rat-like primitive self.
With uh with that together though, a great solution is exercise,
It
even
is.
to food addiction.
Definitely. Firstly, the more you exercise, the less you can eat,
Hmm.
right? Secondly, you feel good, so you don't have to eat out of this
Yeah.
emptiness inside.
Yeah. And you feel good and you exercise, it makes you not want to eat unhealthy because you've
Exactly.
done work like exercise.
I agree.
With with you outside of your research and all the work
Okay.
you do, you mentioned to me that you grew up playing baseball
I
a little
did.
bit.
I
Are
did.
you a fan of a certain team?
No, not well, I'd say I shouldn't say no. So a high point in my academic career, and this isn't ideal for South Carolina, but I'll say it anyway, was I was honored as a distinguished professor at the University of Florida.
Yep, the Wall of
And
Fame.
I got the Wall of Fame, but I also got to be in the 50-yard line at the Swamp.
Oh, nice. I've been in the Swamp. It was not a pretty game for South Carolina, the school I went to, but I have been in there.
My father went to South Carolina
Oh, very cool.
in the day. So
Ha- Have you spent much time in Greenville? I know you've visited to see Rupert a
yes,
few times.
yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a secret. We can't talk about it too much.
I don't want to say anything and ruin it, but probably my younger son's going to try to move there.
Very cool. Very, very cool. With things, and you said you're semi in retirement, right?
Yeah,
What are some things that you're working on now that you might be releasing in the upcoming
sure.
future?
So I finished with my colleagues and mentees the second edition of the Oxford book, The Food and Addiction.
Hmm.
Um, just today, I'm working on uh, a Psychology Today piece that maybe I'll get up for the weekend on sex, gender,
Hmm.
not and how that affects addiction and addiction treatment. So just like for exercise, exercise is better personalized between genders. Addiction treatment seems to be the same. And even the pharmacological treatments, like naltrexone,
Hmm.
works better in certain people than other people. So I'm working on that. I I have a psychedelic medicine project that I'm
Very
doing.
cool.
I've worked in I have two blogs on that, one on ibogaine and one on psilocybin.
Hmm.
I'm interested in that because using that B.F. Skinner model, like for self-administration,
Hmm.
defining drug of abuse, psychedelics are not self-administered. So they're not generally considered addicting. And then the changes that are produced by them um, are different than traditional antidepressants and
Yeah.
medications. So I've edited a couple of journals just on this subject, and I'm interested in that. So I'd say I have way too many interests for the amount of time I have. So I'll never, knock wood, don't think I'll get into much trouble in my midlife crisis at 75.
Like you said, man, you look like you're in your 30s because you're exercising every day.
It's, it just shows you. That's why I was joked to start. I said, you can't tell without an MRI because on the surface,
Hmm.
I look, act, and feel like I'm still a college professor.
And honestly, that's what I tell so many people is as you continue to age, you got to continue to work out, you got to continue to lift weights, you got to continue to be active, be outdoors, interact with communities, because that's what's going to keep you young longer. Well, Dr. Gold, it's been a pleasure having you on. I think I'm probably going to have you on again at some point because I think we could talk a lot longer. But it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on. I mean, you're an absolute legend in the industry. So it was awesome to make the connection and get you to come on. And thank you for all your insight and all the work that you've done. And I mean, it's really incredible. And just thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you. It was a lot of fun. We have a lot of shared interests. That's awesome. And, shout out to Dr. McCormick for
That's right.
introducing us.
Yep. An article he sent my way on Sunday created this connection here today. I love how the world works, and I got a ton of love and respect for what Rupert's built at Crossroads. They're really doing special stuff.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Say hi for me.
I will.